Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and in today's video I want to give you guys a guide on how to defeat Gahun on Heroic so you guys can get ahead of the curve in Battle for Azeroth patch 8.0.1. This fight is actually a very fun fight, but overall an easy fight once you get it down, and a lot of guilds are trying to get this fight on Heroic. My guild was actually able to get this fight done fairly quickly on the US, and we're going to be getting into the mythic side of the whole raid pretty quick. But before we get into that, I do want to give you guys a guide on how to down Gahun, so at least you guys can have a chance at ahead of the curve. In this video, I'm going to break the fights down into 3 different stages and talk about the important parts and the strategies. A lot of this fight is all about doing it as many times as necessary until you kind of get into the swing of things. It's a little weird, but it's kind of cool for Battle for Azeroth, where it feels like during the fight there's always something for someone to do. There's never a dull moment, so if you're used to just sitting behind the boss, tanking and spanking him, then you guys are probably going to have a hard time adjusting to this fight. Overall though, very cool fight, and as we get better gear, it will be miles easier getting this fight done with ahead of the curve. Anyway, let's jump into the fight and the guide. Let's start with the first stage of the fight. You're going to be doing a couple different things. Running bad out, ad management in the middle, and running the orbs. Now, let's talk a bit more detailed about all these aspects. Throughout the whole fight, a lot of you guys are going to be running the bad out, which means you'll get a debuff, and after a while, you guys will explode, letting a bunch of these pus orbs fly out in all directions and drop in bad on the ground, as in, it'll start doing damage to anybody standing in it. You want to run that outside of the room. You don't want to stack it in the middle, you want to run it as far as you can, and you want to let everybody know that you're about to explode so that the orbs are flying. And it's a bit of RNG which way they fly, but everybody in the raid needs to be aware of where they go. And that'll be a mechanic for the whole fight. Next part is ad management for the stage 1. If you are in the middle and not doing the orb run, basically if you are somebody who has high amounts of cleave and not very mobile as a DPS, you're basically just trying to manage the fire. The middle of the part is just going to hurt, and that's something your raid will just have to deal with. And all you can do is just trying to suppress the fire and how bad it can get. So if you're down the middle, you are there to interrupt the ads that are casting to try to reduce their damage and trying to kill them. There will be a lot of ads spawning, and the whole part of this fight is not for you guys to be able to kill all the ads because they'll just be spawning forever. It's just for you to hold out long enough for the orb guys to finish their job. You guys will have a bunch of eyeball ads all over the place. They'll be casting spells, try to stun them or kick them. Second ad to worry about is the Dark Young. A tank is supposed to pick him up. The Dark Young is going to use a couple abilities. One, he's going to slam towards the tank. It doesn't really hurt the tank that much, but everybody else that's non-tank is going to take a lot more damage. Occasionally, Dark Young is going to use an ability called Dark Bargain, which, while you're standing in it, it will buff everybody around, but also nerf them. It'll make them take 25% more damage, but it'll also allow them to deal 25% more damage. What you want to do as a melee DPS, or if you're a caster nearby, is run into that buff so you can do a little bit more DPS. You also can position the Dark Young on the enemy ads to buff them so they deal a little more damage, but they also take more, allowing your DPS to shred through them a little bit faster as long as you can crowd control them. Generally, tanks will run around and try to get the Dark Young near any of the ads, and then tank swap them from time to time, not to make sure to pick up 2 buffs to Dark Bargain. If you already have a debuff for Dark Bargain and you take another one, then you get mind controlled. So you only want to take Dark Bargain every other cast. Shortly after the fight begins, after a little bit of time, you'll also have the Longboy. The Longboy will look a little bit different than any of the eyeball ads. He'll look a lot like a spawn of Gahun, and you'll be casting a cast that you have to interrupt or it's raid-wide damage. So I want to make sure that everybody's trying to interrupt. But when those boys come out, and there's usually going to be 2 of them, so make sure to split your kicks accordingly. Once those guys are coming out, this is about the part where the orb runners should be able to complete their part of the task, so you guys can move on to the next phase. So when you get to that part, this is kind of like the last part to hold out. If you guys are having trouble getting the orbs done by that point, then it's not the issue with people down the middle, it'll be the issue with the orb runners. For the orb running mechanic, you got a couple things. You want to pair up in a couple different groups. You need mobile classes in order to attack pusses on the ground that will have an area of effect. You'll actually see some of those as you approach the fight that will slow anybody inside and deal damage to them. You want to attack them because you're trying to pick up an orb and trying to run it all the way to the end as fast as possible. The longer you hold the orb, the slower you go. So you're trying to pick up any of the mobile classes. You also have an ability to pass the orb. So once you pass it to another player, The other player can pick up the orb, standing exactly where you're throwing it, and then sprint all the way to the end, trying to turn the orb in. You'll basically want to have maybe one healer, maybe one DPS combo, because there you can allow yourselves a little bit extra healing to survive any of the damage you are taking in there, and the healer as well as the DPS both can do a little bit of damage to those pusses whenever you are not the orb runner. There's multiple ways of going about this, but you will need mobile classes to make this happen. Things like Warlock Gates are gonna help, but they're not gonna be enough. But some of the best classes to do these are Demon Hunters and Monks. They have a lot of ways to just get around through the area. Not just a way to kind of like sprint to increase your damage, but rather the Fell Rush and the Fell Leaps. Those abilities kind of ignore the fact that you're getting slowed down. So when you can use those abilities in quick succession back to back to back from class to class, pass the orb to another mobile class, and they can use their mobility in order to reach the orb to the end, then you're able to get the fight done. You got to do this 3 times, so you have to do one side, then the other, then back to the first side you started with. So you got to make sure you have your team set up, which classes are going to run, and know the order in which you're going to do. This part is exceptionally hard for this type of fight because you need to know how exactly you guys are going to do it. So you're going to have a little bit of practice with this part. So you're not going to get this fight done on the first pull. Something to remember from this part, in Heroic you get a debuff. And with this debuff, once you pick up an orb and toss it, you can get it back for a while. So a way that our group found is if you get this part done fairly quickly, during the transition phase, if you allow one of the mobile DPS to die to the boss and battle res him right afterwards, you're able to use that mobile DPS, if you don't have enough in your raid, to do the mechanic more than once, because you'll need to do it twice within the whole raid. And you'll need to run 3 separate orbs, so you gotta kind of figure out which classes you're going to run, which abilities you're going to use for mobility, and which duos and pairs you're willing to run for the orb playstyle. Stage 2, with Transition and Gahoon comes out, and of course we allow one of our melee DPS who is very mobile to get killed by the boss, so we can battle res him so he doesn't have the debuff anymore. Then tanks go on and taunt swap Gahoon on cooldown. Gahoon doesn't have any specific mechanics that put a debuff on the tank, but the more he hits, the harder he starts to hit. So you're basically just trying to tank swap on cooldown. So whenever taunt is available, just press it, and just make sure the tanks are not holding the Gahoon for too long. You are still going to be running bad out, so remember to keep track of that whenever it comes out. And you kind of want to spread away from everybody else. You don't want to stack. He'll do a wave, where you'll literally see a wave come from Gahoon that will kind of just hit all the players, and then everybody will pop. And every person that pops will get a dot on them, and the dot will keep increasing until you advance to the next stage of the fight. So you're trying to manage this dot, and there's a couple ways to throw it off, but that's kind of where it gets a little difficult. Well, you don't want to make 2 players next to one another, because when they both go pop, they can actually give each other an extra stack of the debuff, which makes it that much harder for your healers to get through this fight done. This part is very important to make sure nobody gets too many dots, because it makes it a lot easier, as the pressure is just not nearly as big by the end of the fight. Then you're going to be stacking for Blood Feast. Blood Feast is an ability that Gahoon will use from time to time. He will root a random player, and everybody who runs into the root, after a little bit of time, it will take off all of your dot clear. But then it will make an add, and the add will be as strong as the amount of dots in the stacks that he was able to absorb. So this is what we do for our stacks. For the first stack, you have tanks only with the person rooted, and then you kill the add. For second stack, we have everybody else but the tanks, and then you ignore the add. By third stack, you should be coming up towards the stage 3 transition. So by the time third stack comes out, you should be able to get the laser on the boss. Everybody stacks in, clears their dots before the third phase, and then continues to DPS the boss, cleaving off of the boss onto the adds, but mostly focusing on Gahoon. While that whole thing is going on, to make the laser happen, you're gonna have to do the orb running strat again. So you're gonna have to plan out which classes of which players are gonna be doing the orb running strat and when they are all gonna do it. For this fight, it's especially important to make sure that everybody survives, because if you have one of the people not running orbs, you basically have to wipe and do it again, which makes it a very difficult fight. Stage 3, you're bursting down Gahoon. This is a perfect time to pop Bloodlust. Hell, it's even a good idea to pop Bloodlust 10 seconds before you have your orb done. So you're supposed to have the AoE where everybody is stacking with the laser come down at the same time. Everybody already pre-bloodlusted, already DPSing Gahoon down. you're trying to get Gahun down to 20%. At 20%, this is where the stage 3 transition will happen. At stage 3 transition, just for the first part, try not to get hit by falling rocks. Gahun becomes basically immune to all damage, and then starts just having a tantrum on the floor. And then you'll have rocks falling from the sky, so you want to avoid them. The further you are, the less damage it'll do to you, so make sure to get as far away as you can. Usually the last rock will land down in the middle, and this is where the final part of the fight comes in. This is where damage is going to ramp up, and mechanics are going to become a lot more predictable, less sporadic. But the longer the fight goes on, the less predictable it all becomes as the timers kind of get off base, which I think is part of the mechanic to make this fight harder. So the tanks are still doing their taunting thing back and forth. What you're going to be doing is still running bad out. That's going to be first mechanic is somebody's going to have debuffs, run them out, drop it, make sure nobody gets hit by the orbs. Second part, find a safe spot. You'll see these pestles spawn on the ground, and you'll have some spots that won't have these pestles and others that will. So stand in clear spots, wait until the initial pestles pop, and then you go stand in those clear spots afterwards. Make sure you don't go too quick because the delay on the pop is present, and there's moments where people have started running early thinking that the damage effect has happened but the animation is kind of delayed. The damage happens with the animation, so if it feels like it's delayed, because it actually is. So run bad out, then find a safe spot. Then, once his bar fills up at the bottom, a purple bar, you want to make sure to be turning around or using abilities like Local Shadows, AMS, in order to immune the effect of AoE fear. If you have a shaman, and if somebody forgot to turn around, it's a good idea to place down Tremor Totem. And then right afterwards, right after the fear, you want to make sure you're spread for the dot wave. And then you do this fight in succession over and over and over until the boss is dead or your party is dead. So first you want to run the bad, find a safe spot, turn around at full bar, and spread. Then do it again. Run the bad, find a safe spot, turn around, spread. Over and over and over and over, and eventually at one point these timers will become kind of stacking on each other at the same time. The dot that the whole raid has will start ramping up even higher, and if you cannot kill the boss by then this might be the DPS check for you. So this is the part where you just want to pump as much deeps as possible, because there's going to be a lot of dot damage to the raid, and unless your healers are good at avoiding all the damage or can manage the mana perfectly, you guys might need here for this part a little bit extra gear to get this fight done. Gahun is a very interesting fight, and I feel like a lot of you guys will enjoy it once you figure out the mechanics. It's really cool because it feels like there's so many things going on at the same time. It doesn't feel like the whole group has to wait for any of the parts. It feels like there's so many different active components at the same time, which means that teamwork for this fight in particular is going to be very necessary. And I feel like it's an interesting fight as the very first BFA boss. So I thought it was really cool, and I cannot wait to see what this is going to be like on Mythic. I don't know if I'll make a guide for this fight on Mythic. I don't know if our guild will be able to get to Mythic that quick. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see, because we were able to get this fight down fairly quickly on Heroic, even our guild making it in like the top 50 US part. So I think it'll be awesome to see how we do when it comes to the mythic parts of the fight. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I do hope you enjoyed. Hopefully you guys find this guide somewhat helpful, and hopefully the strategies that we used, you guys can maybe implement or copy or modify to be even more efficient. Since, you know, this was literally our first time getting Gahun down, I'm pretty sure next time we could clean up a few things. If you guys are having trouble with this fight, don't give up, just keep trying at it with your guild. And sometimes, just know, it might be a matter of having not enough gear. So if you guys are struggling with this fight now, just wait a little bit, week or two, and after you grind out a little bit more gear, this fight is going to feel a lot less stressful as the game goes on. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I do hope you enjoyed. I'll see all of you in the next one.